What? I can't believe it. A wife trying to use her husband's parents' bathroom? That's unbelievably rude. This is why I don't like those brought up by single parents. Since we got married, I have been trying to find out what my mother-in-law doesn't like about me, to the point where I could say that her hobby is bullying me. My mother-in-law has been bothering me a lot in this way. When I widened my eyes at the ridiculous comment about wives not being allowed to use the bathroom, she said, "Well, now that you know that, just go outside and do it. If you don't make it in time, you will be the one in trouble, right?" I left the house with a smile on my face, thinking it was her head that was unbelievable. 3 hours later, there she was in front of me. "No! Stop, please!" I saw my mother-in-law desperately pleading with tears in her eyes. My name is Willow, a 30-year-old office worker. My husband Robert and I got married just a few months ago, after 3 years of dating. I would like to say that our marriage is smooth sailing, but in fact, it is not. I have no complaints about my husband, and he's very supportive of doing the housework. The problem lies with my mother-in-law, who lives outside of the state. When I decided to get married, my married friends advised me that no matter how kind my mother-in-law seems, there will always be problems with them. So I was prepared for it to some extent. However, my mother-in-law was far crazier than I had imagined. About a month after we got married, we came home from work and found someone sitting in front of our front door. Who is that? What if it's a prowler? No one was scheduled to visit us that day, so we were contemplating on whether to talk to the management company or call the police. As we were wondering, the person noticed us and called out, "You are so late! How many hours do you think I waited here?" It was only then that we realized that the person approaching us was my husband's mother.
"What? Why are you here, Mom? If you are coming, you should call me. It's common sense."
My husband scolded my mother-in-law for showing up without any notice, but she dodged his rebuke. "Let me in now that you've come home. I'm completely chilled under the cold weather." As soon as she said this, I became impatient. "Please, could you give us a minute? It's a little messy right now." But my mother-in-law ignored my words and pushed me out of the way and made her way into the room without permission. "Oh my, what is this? I don't know how you could make the room this messy," my mother-in-law exclaimed when she saw our slightly messy house. I blushed from embarrassment. My husband Robert was quick to respond.
"There's no need to shout. It's not even that messy. It's the busiest season of the year at our company, and Willow and I are both tired these days. We both decided that we'll do all the cleaning on our days off. Besides, it's none of your business, is it?"
my husband said, scratching his head as he headed for the bathroom. As he said, we've been working hard lately and had just come home that day with takeout. My mother-in-law glanced at the bag and sighed. "I guess a child raised in a home without a mother is no good. Housework is an important part of being a wife. How can you not know that?" My mother-in-law's words hurt me. My mother passed away when I was very young, and my father was the one who raised me. I remember the negative expression on my mother-in-law's face when she found out about it when our families first met. She talked about housework all the time, as if she had completed her image of me as a woman who could not do housework. At that time, I couldn't help but just smile at her stuffy comments. Eventually, my husband and father-in-law helped me out of the situation by warning her that it was rude for saying that to a person who had just met. But at the end,
Willow get hot-tempered sometimes, probably because she was raised by only her father. However, she is a good cook, much like my late wife. Please, I ask you to take it easy on her.
my father said jokingly, while smiling and laughing, but I'm sure he was frustrated. That night, my father sent me a message saying,
Don't give in.
Fortunately, my father-in-law was a kind man, and my husband was always on my side. I didn't like my mother-in-law, but I didn't have the option to reconsider my marriage. After that, my mother-in-law continued to visit us at home without any notice. Each time she did, my husband's lightning struck. You don't have to be shy just because it's in front of Willow. She thought that my husband was embarrassed like an adolescent boy in junior high school. How positive could she be? I couldn't help but to ask myself every time. The third time, my husband snapped and called his father on the spot. Apparently, my mother-in-law had told him that she was going to stay at a friend's house, and he never thought she would be at our house.
Put your mother on the phone right away.
My father-in-law told my husband this, and my mother-in-law seems to be scolded again over the phone. After this incident, my mother-in-law's unannounced visits stopped, but now I began to receive frequent phone calls. She would ask me what I was going to cook for dinner tonight, or whether I had vacuumed the house, and so on. I was quite annoyed at her intrusion into my private life. She also asked me about my income, and whether she was making fun of my father for working even after he retired. She also asked me about my father's income and savings. My mother-in-law was not afraid to ask me things that even our relatives wouldn't normally ask, no matter how close they were. Of course, I had no obligation to answer. Ha ha ha, I wonder how much. I just fake smiled and got through it. Although she was asking me so many unnecessary questions, my mother-in-law didn't talk much about herself. I remember a similar girl when I was a student. She was a gossip monger and took pleasure in the misery of others. It took a lot of energy to deal with her, so I reduced the number of times I answered the phone to once every 2 calls, then once every 3. Eventually, I started answering the phone every 5 times. Then, when I didn't answer the phone, she started blasting her little complaints to me into my voicemail. Don't get carried away, even though you're just a wife. You know, kids who don't have their mothers by their side don't grow up to have any common sense. I can see it in your father. He looks like he has a low income and uneducated. And of course you're the same too. I didn't deserve to be told this much just because I didn't answer the phone. In short, my mother-in-law hates me. If that's the case, I don't like her either. I don't care if she talks bad about me, but I don't allow her to talk bad about my father. We don't even have to get along. Fortunately, we live pretty far from each other, so I will keep a reasonable distance from her. I was still thinking that way at the time, but I had no idea that a few months later, I would find myself in such a situation. When the end of the year approached, I contacted my father and talked about which family to visit for the holidays.
I have to work at the end of the year, so I probably won't be able to go home. It's the first holiday since you got married, right? Wouldn't your mother-in-law be annoyed if you didn't go back to Robert's parents' house?
When my father said that, I thought to myself, that's true too. Thus, I made my first trip to my parents-in-law's house. When I arrived, my mother-in-law greeted us with a smile. However, The moment my husband entered the house, she shut the door. I was stunned, still standing outside. "Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't recognize you," says mother-in-law, who opened the door with a smirk on her face. "It's no big deal." I smiled back at her.
Oh, I see. The Carter's family hasn't arrived yet.
Carter is Robert's brother, who is 2 years younger than him. He has a wife named Maya. In fact, Carter and Robert got married respectively at almost the same time, so their mother was quite upset at the beginning of the marriage because her beloved sons got married all at once. Maya, my sister-in-law, is a lovely, quiet girl, the type of girl I, even as a woman, would want to protect. While waiting for my brother-in-law and his wife to arrive, my mother-in-law and I began preparing the meal in the kitchen. She didn't seem to be amused by my surprisingly skillful movements. "Well, it's normal to be able to do this much. The important thing is the taste." She seems to be upset at my lukewarm answers to that. "You really aren't worth a lovable wife." She sat down on the chair with a thump and mumbled to herself. It's driving me crazy. My son is taken by you, and there's nothing to look forward to when living alone with my husband. The chatterbox neighbor next door, I don't know if she has a new grandchild or what, but her bragging is just annoying." I didn't want to be in the same space anymore with my mother-in-law, who has nothing but bad things to say about other people whenever she opens her mouth. I should go to the bathroom to escape this. "I'm going to the bathroom. Please look over the pot." Then, my mother-in-law stood in the doorway as I was about to leave the kitchen. What is it?" I was puzzled, and my mother-in-law grinned at me with a sickening smile. "What? I can't believe it. A wife trying to use her husband's parents' bathroom. That's unbelievably rude. This is why I don't like those brought up by single parents." I didn't understand her words, and it simply confused me. "You say single parent every time you open your mouth, but I have never been ashamed of being raised by a single parent. I think you should stop thinking like that, because it's quite rude as a person." Perhaps infuriated by my attitude, she finally grabbed my arm as I was leaving the kitchen. "I don't care what you say. I can't let an outsider use our bathroom." "Well, now that you know that, just go outside and do it. If you don't make it in time, you will be the one in trouble, right?" She even told me to go to a park nearby, so I just ran out of the house. When I returned to my parents' house a few minutes later, I heard arguing from the back of the room. "Carter, what nonsense are you saying? What do you mean you're cutting me off?" Shouting, my mother-in-law's eyes were on my brother-in-law and his wife.
Why don't you understand? I mean exactly what I said. You have been nasty to Maya. Did you think I didn't know anything? I came here today to cut you off."
I could see the strong will in my brother-in-law's eyes as he glared at her.
"Not only to Robert's place, but to Carter's place. Really, how much time do you have on your hands?"
My father-in-law was furious, and my mother-in-law scurried around looking for an ally. But of course, there was not a single such person in the room. As if to push further, Robert, who had noticed me, asked me where I had been. "Oh, me? Your mother was very adamant about not using the bathroom in this house, so I barely made it." In contrast to my laughing, my mother-in-law's face turned pale, and her family member's face turned red and furious. No, I would never say such a foolish thing. You really are a bad person, Willow. How could you lie like that?" Obviously, I was not going to play along with my mother-in-law's action, so I reached into my pocket. "Well, now that you know that, Just go outside and do it. If you don't make it in time, you will be the one in trouble, right?
What echoed in the quiet room was the exuberant voice of my mother-in-law. And so, I would never say, what was that again? I stood in front of my mother-in-law and pulled out the voice recorder I had in my pocket. When I got married, I received advice from many of my friends. I heard that there are nice mother-in-law in the world, but very rarely, there are those who develop dementia only towards their wives. What they said yes to yesterday becomes no the next day. I even had a friend who referred the voice recorder as a bride-to-be's tool, so I took her advice. My mother-in-law was gritting her teeth, looking quite chagrined. Then the intercom rang.
Oh my, we have a visitor. Look, let's put this conversation to rest.
Perhaps thinking it was a chance to change the subject, she stood up and hurried to the front door. However, when she didn't seem to come back, we also went to the front door.
No, I didn't mean to.
My mother-in-law was having an argument with a woman around the same age as her. Then, the other woman noticed us.
There she is, Robert's wife. When you came to my house earlier, you forgot your handkerchief, so I came to give it to you.
I quietly approached her. Oh, thank you so much for your help earlier. I almost didn't make it in time. I accepted the handkerchief from the neighbor with a smile. Next to her, my mother-in-law's face was paler than before. The neighbor then glared at my mother-in-law.
I was surprised when your daughter-in-law came to my house to use the bathroom. You should be nicer to your daughter-in-law, you know. Your son's wife is the best thing for your son once he's married. Well, maybe it's too late for the warning, though.
The neighbor snickered at my mother-in-law and went back to her house. My mother-in-law glared at me.
Why did you go to the chatterbox house out of all the houses? I told you to go to the park. Tomorrow, the whole town will be talking about it.
When she told me to go to the park bathroom, I went straight to the neighbor's house without hesitation. What was on my mind at that time? Neighbor, chatterbox neighbor. My feelings were bouncing. It seems that the relatives of the house next door were gathered too, and I could hear them enjoying themselves so much, even from outside. I rang the intercom, wishing I could have spent my time happily like that. A woman answered and asked who I was. I'm sorry to bother you so suddenly. I'm Willow, the wife of the eldest son next door. Could you please let me use your bathroom? They saw my face like I was about to cry and kindly let me into their house. When the neighbors heard what had happened, they were quite indignant and said that it was unbelievable. I forgot my handkerchief on purpose, of course.
We came home today to break off our relationship.
Robert, my husband, opened his mouth. The mother-in-law looked up, shocked that her too beloved son had told her that they were cutting her off. She looked as if it was the end of the world.
Because I couldn't be helped. I missed you so much. You should at least understand how your mother feels.
My mother-in-law cried out and went to her room. Her childish behavior made everyone in the room speechless. Feeling sorry to leave our father-in-law alone, I finished up cooking with Maya, and we sat around the table to enjoy the food. Perhaps envious of the laughter, my mother-in-law finally came out of her room.
Willow, Maya, I thought to myself, from now on, we will be a family and we will get along without any secrets.
At my mother-in-law's words, my in-laws' faces froze up and Maya looked frightened. I don't know what my mother-in-law was thinking, but I responded, No secrets, I see. I'm actually hiding something even from Robert as well. Seeing me so excited, my mother-in-law thought she had been accepted.
What? You can't keep things between married couples, you know. Come on, talk to me. With that, I put my phone on the desk. Robert, I haven't told you this, but your mother and I are on the phone quite a bit. I've been so busy with work lately that I don't get to pick up the phone very often. But you see, your mother always leaves me a message. Contrary to my family members who listen carefully, my mother-in-law's face turns pale again and screams, "No! Stop! Stop! Please!" My father-in-law told her to shut up, and the only she could do was to hide her face. The room was filled with the abusive words towards me and the insults towards my father. When I finished playing everything, everybody was shaking from anger.
Hey, you! Get out of this house right now!
My mother-in-law, perhaps thinking she had no excuse, burst into tears and pleaded to her husband that she did not want a divorce. Carter, Maya, Robert, and I got up and headed for the front door. My mother-in-law rushed after us and said, "Please, I apologize, so please forgive me." By then, she looked like a monster with her makeup ruined. If you're going to cry, you shouldn't have bullied your daughter-in-law in the first place. Then again, my father does work, but it's not for lack of money. He is a board member of a company, so I think he has some money. But don't you think that's none of your business? Hearing my words, my mother-in-law fell silent. On the car ride home,
I'm sorry, Willow. Because I talked to you about it, I guess I kind of dragged you into it.
a few days ago, Maya had asked me for advice. The subject was, of course, the bullying of the mother-in-law. Maya, who is very sensitive, was pale and neurotic. When I heard about them thinking of cutting her off, I discussed it with my husband, and we decided to do that as well. What are you apologizing for? It's not your fault at all. Maya was probably more hurt than I was. I was rather glad that she talked to me about it. Actually, I had already told my father-in-law about what we were thinking, and he said he would decide whether to get a divorce or not after seeing her behavior. It seems that my mother-in-law's behavior that day was decisive enough for a divorce, and a few days later, my father-in-law informed me about it. My mother-in-law's parents had already passed away, so with no one to rely on and no money to move far away, she had no choice but to remain in her hometown. It looks like she started working part-time, but the story about her had already spread within the small town. What? She wouldn't let her daughter-in-law use the bathroom? How did she do something so stupid? They gossiped about her, and she became completely isolated at work. And soon she quit her job and moved to another one. She got what she deserved, and she will regret it for the rest of her life. My father-in-law sold his house and moved near ours. My brother-in-law and his wife also live nearby, so the five of us often get together and spend our time happily around the dinner table. My father also comes to visit occasionally, and he and my father-in-law have become such good friends that they call each other by their first names. When I was a little girl, I sometimes felt lonely on days when my father came home late from work. But now, I see my loving husband and his family having a good time in front of me. As I watch them with a smile on my face, I sincerely reflect on the happiness I feel today.